Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where we say, for the love of God, stop giving senile old losers hammers. You give a senile old loser a hammer, and everything is going to be a nail. Holy hell, I talk about the disastrous trade policy of the Trump administration, our abjectly worst, most senile, god-awful president we've ever had, and it only gets stupider. So I've talked about the tariffs, right? 1 minute we have no tariffs, next minute we have 20% tariffs, there's 145% tariffs, and there's 50% tariffs, right? We're going to have 50% tariffs on copper coming up. A whole bunch of countries, 100 countries are going to get letters in the mail, stern letters in the mail from Trump, where he will tell them what their trade policy is going to be. I've been talking about this and how it just doesn't seem to make much rhyme or reason. There's policies. Are we for globalization or are we for isolation? Are we for military adventurism or again, are we for isolation? That type of thing. Those are policies. And then there's the implementations of those policies. And apparently the only implementation Trump seems to understand is tariff. Because by God, if these other countries don't do what he wants them to do, he will continue to whip the crap out of American citizens until those countries give up. By God, we do not want to get into a war with Russia. Let me tell you right now, we don't want to get into a war with Russia because Trump will be running around shooting American citizens, warning Putin that he won't stop shooting American citizens until Putin surrenders. Anyways, what's going on? This is the worst timeline. This is the worst timeline. So how are you all doing today? Anyways, is as it is. You know, if you're on a road trip down the highway to hell, you might as well crack a beer, light up a spliff, and just have fun with it. That's what I would say. Anywho, my little shout out for the things that I do. If you don't know about silicondojo.com, this is a little project I have. We've been doing fireside chats. We're going to have Louis Rossman on Monday, and we're going to have David Cox, VP of AI models over at IBM. He's going to be on Thursday. These are Zoom sessions, so you can come to silicondojo.com. You can register. You can show up at the Zoom session, and then you can ask your questions to the guests. The idea is to bring in technology professionals from around, the spectrum of the technology world, and explain to them how they see technology and what bets they are making. So silicondojo.com. That's there. That exists. You want to know what also exists? 50% tariffs on Brazil. 50% tariffs on Brazil. Why are we doing 50% tariffs on Brazil? Well, I can tell you the reason we've been told. I don't know if that's the reason or not. Oh, you just gotta laugh. If you don't laugh, you're just gonna shoot yourself. That's just how it's gonna go. So anyways, in Brazil is doing reciprocal tariffs against us. So CNBC, whatever, everybody's saying the same stuff because it is what it is. Brazil will respond to Trump's 50% tariff with reciprocity, says Da Silva, their president. So yeah, out of damn near almost nowhere, a couple of days ago, Trump came out and he said he was going to be putting 50% tariffs against Brazil, with the overarching theme of why, and this is where it gets to be really wonky and weird, is basically Bolsonaro is their previous president. He was the Trump of Brazil. And the Trump of Brazil is now getting prosecuted to high hell and back. And so Trump feels it's very unjust how Bolsonaro is being dealt with. And so that's why he is trying to punish Brazil. So internal, political, legal matters, he's using a 50% tariff. And this is where I say, give a senile old loser a hammer. Everything is a nail. what does this have to do with tariffs? You know, if he wanted to kick out the Brazilian ambassadors out of the United States, I mean, that would be a political action, right? If he stopped maybe military training programs with Brazil or something else, that may be commiserate. Why is taxing the ever-loving shit out of the American citizens the solution to what he feels is an unjust prosecution in another country? Literally, all he understands. Well, the only tool that he feels he has is tariffs. I don't believe he understands tariffs. Do remember, Trump has a hell of a lot of business experience, as in bankrupting businesses. So yeah, this is where we're at. And why I keep talking about this is, one, it's important. And two, it's also for all the people out there to understand just how fucking weird the economic situation is in the United States right now. And understand, right? When I was doing those one-on-one conversations with so many of my viewers, the whole thing is, Eli, how do I get a job? Not how do I fix a problem, not how do I find problems to solve, not how do I determine what is the most valuable problem to solve, all that kind of stuff, right? Not explain to me the difference in stacks, right? It's all about job, job, job. And the issue is, right, the job market, the technology job market in the United States, for at least the last decade, has just been stupid. It hasn't made a goddamn bit of sense. Now, you know, a couple of years ago, it didn't make a damn bit of sense because they were hiring so many people. And I've talked about this before, right? With the COVID boom, where they hired tens of thousands of tech employees because everybody was going to be working from home. You know, one of the things I've talked about is that technology infrastructure scales exponentially, not linearly, right? If you have a hamburger restaurant, right? If one cook can cook 50 burgers per hour and you need to serve 200 hamburgers per hour, then you need 4 cooks, right? If you need to serve, 400 burgers per hour, then you need 8 cooks. That's what we call scaling linearly, right? There's a certain amount of resources that need to go in for a particular number of product. You double that amount of product, you basically need to double the amount of resources that go in. The technology world, one of the reasons why investors love it so much is it scales exponentially. You need one administrator to administer 1 server. You need 2 administrators to administer 100 servers. You need 3 administrators to administer 1,000 servers. And you need 4 administrators to administer 10,000 servers. And that might actually be generous when you start looking at Ansible and all the orchestration tools that currently exist. And the idea being is that, you know, you can just add just a massive amount of resources and only, you know, be required to hire a couple of people in order to support that. And so when there was all this hiring going on, if you followed me for any length of time, I told you, I don't know what the fuck's going on. This doesn't make any sense. It literally doesn't make any sense. But there was just a hiring all these people, right, to get asses in seats because it wasn't about, had nothing to do with scaling. It had all to do with trying to grab investor money, right? But now we've flipped the script around. And so they're firing tens of thousands of people at a go. Microsoft, you know, the last couple of months has laid off 16,000 people. Meta, I don't even know, tens of thousands of people they've let go. Google's letting people go the whole 9 yards, and they're letting people go because they hired too many people to begin with, and they're saying it's artificial intelligence. It has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. And we're just in this wonky world. And then add on to that, Trump's tariffs and all this other idiocy. You know, you think about it with things like data centers and server rooms, right? They're about to put a 50% tariff on copper. 50% tariff on copper. Best case scenario, we could scale up copper production in the United States. It would take well over a decade. So, electrical wire, right? Any cabling other than fiber optic, essentially, the cost of that is going to go up. That's on top of the steel tariffs, right? If you got racks for servers, that's steel tariffs and the aluminum tariffs and all that kind of thing. And we have all of this wonk doodle crap going on. And imagine for a second, just for one moment, pretend that your manager, your boss, your owner is an actual human being. There's an actual human being, and they're having to make decisions within this environment. In an environment where one day the economic whatever situation can be one thing, and then literally a coked out, senile, old loser who's pretended to be an alpha fucking dog can just change his mind and the entire landscape changes. Right? Think about this. When you are renting office space, right? The absolute least lease you're going to get is a year. And for real businesses generally don't take out 1-year leases. They take out 5 to 10-year leases. And that's not on 1,000 square feet. That's on like 100,000 or 1,000,000 square feet of space. And think about this environment where you've got to be a CEO. And you've got to make a bet, and you've got to sign the dotted line. You've got to sign your name on a contract to basically lock your company into a financial decision for 5 to 10 years. And you're looking at this. Anyway. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said Wednesday that his country will respond with reciprocity to U.S. President Donald Trump's newly announced 50% tariff on his country's exports, citing a recently adopted Brazilian law that authorizes the government to take proportional countermeasures. Trump said Wednesday. Okay, so when I'm recording this is Thursday, so yeah, Wednesday. The U.S. will impose the tariff, and that's what I'm saying. God bless Biden. You know what I did not appreciate enough about Biden? See, dead people are slow. Dead people are slow. The one thing is Biden had horrible policies, but he implemented them in a reasonable manner so that you could keep up with the stupidity that he was implementing. This, literally, you're like, when did this come up? It's like Wednesday. You're like, what day is today? Thursday. Oh, shit, this happened yesterday. Fuck. This is why you do not give 70-year-olds caffeine. 7-year-olds and 70-year-olds don't get caffeine. Anyways, Trump said Wednesday the U.S. will impose a tariff on imports from Brazil starting August 1. So we are July 10th right now, so the end of the month. Partly in retaliation for the ongoing prosecution of the country's former president, Jair Bolsonaro. Trump said in a letter that the new tariff, a massive jump from the 10% rate the U.S. imposed on imports from Brazil in early April, is also a response to the very unfair trade relationship between the two countries. Now, an interesting thing to think about with this is, so you're going from 10% to 50%. But was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday. Fuck. Anyways, Tuesday, he came out with a threat. So there's a BRICS nation. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That actually has a lot more countries in there now. But anyways, it's called the BRICS bloc. And they're trying to figure out a path without the United States. And so it was a Tuesday. Anyway, I think it was Tuesday. Trump came out and was screaming about this and said these are anti-American policies. So any country that supported the anti-American BRICS policies would get an additional 10% tariff. I talked about that in yesterday's video. So an interesting question to think about here. So he is going to put a 50% tariff on Brazil because they're prosecuting Bolsonaro. But because Brazil is obviously part of BRICS, it's the B in the BRICS, does that mean they're going to then get an additional 10% on top of that 50%? Is it going to be a 50% tariff or a 60% tariff? And when I say this, it sounds like I'm being a snarky jackass, which, yeah, I am. But this is what I want you to understand about the idiocy, the complete and fucking senile idiocy of the Trump administration, is it literally becomes difficult to understand basic policy implementations, right? Whether or not you agree with it, I do not, right? But The issue becomes, even if you do agree with it, do you actually understand the rules of the game that he is creating? He does not spend enough time to think through his fucking insanity that's going to drive our country into the ground. Because he's an alpha dog. And alpha dogs just piss on whatever the fuck they want to piss on, and they don't care about the consequences. Which is why we should really have a human being as president. Eli the computer guy. Human being for 2028. Anyways, the letter to De Silva followed a nearly 24 others that Trump has recently sent to other world leaders dictating steep new tariff rates on the goods they sell to the United States. He will continue to whip the American citizens until the other countries comply. But the letter to Lula goes further than the rest by imposing a new U.S. import rate explicitly as a punishment for a country engaging in internal political and legal affairs that Trump dislikes. Trump is sad. So there's going to be these tariffs. So the American public is going to pay the price. Trump has previously sounded off on Brazil over his treatment of Bolsonaro, a vocal ally of the U.S. president who is standing trial over his role in an alleged coup to overturn his 2022 re-election loss. Trump called the situation, quote, an international disgrace. Yes, Trump. Yes, Trump. I would agree. There's an international disgrace going on right now. In the letter, which he shared publicly in a Truth Social post, he slammed the Bolsonaro trial as a witch hunt, echoing the language he used to describe the multiple criminal investigations that he faced before winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election. He also railed against, quote, Brazil's insidious attacks on free elections and the fundamental free speech rights of Americans, apparently referring to Brazilian Supreme Court's recent ruling that could hold social media platforms liable for their users' content. Trump also claimed that Brazil's trade policies have caused, quote, unsustainable trade deficits against the United States, which threaten the U.S. economy and national security. Wait for it. Trump says Brazil's trade policies have caused unsustainable trade deficits against the United States. But, and there's a but, the United States has a goods trade surplus with Brazil, which totaled $7.4 billion in 2024, according to the Office of U.S. Trade Representative. So we have a surplus. We sell more to Brazil than they sell to us. And they need to get punished for the deficit that doesn't exist. Because why actually make sure you understand the numbers? Trump also wrote that the United States is launching an investigation into potential unfair trade practices by Brazil. He said the probe is based on, quote, Brazil's continued attack on the digital trade activities of American companies. Quote, please understand that the 50% number is far less than what is needed to level playing field we must have with your country, Trump wrote, quote, and is necessary to have this is to rectify the grave injustices of the current regime. So yeah, that's currently what's going on. So Brazil is dealing with a 50% tariff because Trump's having a fucking hissy fit. So our prices, the taxes on the American citizens are going to continue to go up because Trump is a fucking sad, senile sack o' crap. Where does that leave us as a country? Yeah, who the hell knows? You can't keep up with it. You can't keep up with it. There's one thing and there's the next thing. Apparently, it's either August 1st or August 9th. Now, so there are all these, right? So there are the reciprocal tariffs that were supposed to go into effect a while ago. Oh, apparently something on the order of 70 days ago, there are these reciprocal tariffs. Although they weren't reciprocal because the math didn't make any sense. Anyways, there were reciprocal tariffs that were supposed to go in. And then he paused those. and then everybody just gets an across-the-board 10% tariff. So there's simply a 10% tax on the American public for buying anything that was not made in the United States. Well, what he said is that all these countries were coming and begging in order to create trade agreements with the Trump administration. That's what he said, right? He's the alpha dog. The other beta dogs are cowering before him. Except we are like 70 days into this whole process, and we have the UK. The UK created some kind of trade agreement, and Vietnam. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel, Brits? Hey, Brits, remember when the sun never set on the British Empire? Yeah. In 2025, it's you and Vietnam are the only suckers in this place. Anyways, so those two created agreements, and the other countries really just don't want to deal with our crap. And so he's sending out letters. He's sending out very stern letters to say how disappointed he is in the rest of the world. And those letters are going to go out, and they're going to dictate some kind of policy. Right? And so, I don't know. I guess supposedly the tariffs are supposed to snap back on August 1st, but he wants to give people more time, so they'll snap back maybe on August 9th, I think. It's hard to keep up with. And that's on top of the 50% tariffs that are going to come into effect for copper, and the 200% tariffs that are going to come into effect for pharmaceuticals. And I mean, how do you do business in this way? All these things, right? If you look at the business people, if you look at the people that are making decisions, they all agree that even if you're for this, even if you're for the tariffs, even if you're for this policy decision, that is just going to take so much time. It's interesting, like with the copper stuff, right? They're talking, I mean, it's 10 to 15 years before we can theoretically replace the amount of copper that we import from the rest of the world and actually produce it here in the United States. So those taxes are going to be with us a hell of a long time, right? If you look at so much of this other stuff, manufactured in China, right? So many of these companies, right? Trump is putting tariffs on China, and these technology companies are like, oh no, we've got to move out of China. Does that mean they're moving to Texas? No. It means they're moving to India because it's still too expensive to do stuff here. I talked about that yesterday. Samsung is creating a $44 billion fab in Texas. And they're postponing when they're going to open it up because they don't have enough customers for it. Because it's not actually working as a business venture. And there's all this stuff. And that's the thing is, like, think about the insanity of this environment. And then imagine your boss as a human being who has to make plans based off of forecasts for years in advance. And then wonder why the job market is just going sideways. Why I can't give you a lot of advice for it. Right? You want to learn how to solve problems? I can teach you how to solve problems. If you want to figure out the appropriate stack, I can explain to you the different stacks. You want to get a job? I don't know. Fuck if I know. So anyways, this is what is currently going on, and this is where I believe, as an American, that the rest of the world has to decouple from the United States. If the rest of the world does not decouple from the United States, then they're all a bunch of goddamn morons that deserve the disaster, that deserve to be in this disaster with us together. Because how this isn't going through Congress, right? That's the thing. This is not how our government is supposed to work. And the problem is right now is that the Republicans, right? These pompous, prissy-ass little fucking poodles, right, are pissing all over themselves, pretending that they're alpha dogs, right? Right? The GOP is full of alpha dogs, and they are pissing on each other every day to prove how doggish they are. And so no matter what Trump does, right, the Congress has to push back on it, right? The only way there's a checks and balances, is the president does something dumb and the Congress pushes back, right? Those castrated, whipped little fucking poodles refuse to do their jobs. The dogs refuse to do the jobs of men. And because of that, Trump can come out with whatever policy he wants. He can throw that out to the world. And they're just gonna roll over and piss on themselves. Yeah, are we good boys? Are we good boys, Mr. Trump? Mr. Trump. I don't know what to do. What do you do when the GOP just decides to be fucking traitors? What do you do when an entire political party decides to shit on their fucking country? Sit in your basement and scream into a camera, of course. The only real thing you can do in these trying times is go into your basement and scream into a camera. Real men are not senators. Real men are vloggers. Anyways, so what do you think about this? Even if you love Trump, even if you're just a diehard GOP and you're like, Eli, you got Trump derangement syndrome, do you think this is a good way for a government to function? Do you think... I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. Do remember, this is the modern world of social media. Whether it's a thumbs up, a thumbs down, an awesome comment, or a god-awful comment, it is all an interaction as far as the algorithm is concerned. So put your interaction down below. And with that, I'm going to go have a cry. See y'all later.